Welcome to the In Early podcast, where I speak to those at the forefront of the digital assets and technology sectors, telling real-life stories, considering the growth and growing pains of the industry, and exploring how blockchain and other technology has made an impact on people's lives. My name is Matt Green, and I head up blockchain, digital assets, and technology disputes at law firm Lawrence Stevens. Now, a friend of mine, Monty Mumford, told me about token recovery at the start of this year, and I thought, these guys are going to be really extremely busy, given the number of frauds and scams that occur, right? So the Chainalysis 2024 crime report notes that, and I quote, "Scams were once again one of the biggest drivers of cryptocurrency-based crime, with associated wallets bringing in at least $4.6 billion in revenue in 2023, end quote. So I guess you knew you'd be busy, right? But before we get there, I'd like to understand a little bit about you guys, your journey, how you got to where you are, and then we can talk about token recovery itself. So let's start with you, Marcin, because your involvement in all of this, and when I say this, I mean blockchain, digital assets, as far as I can see, started with intellectual property practice in law. So tell me a little bit about that.
That's correct. So I'm a Polish attorney at law. I did my bar training in Warsaw. I'm admitted to the bar. And back then, pre-2017, I was working in different law firms in the intellectual property space. Patent law, trademark, unfair competition, all sorts of stuff. Due to family reasons, I moved to Switzerland in 2017. And I was already a little bit interested in, legal aspects of blockchain, what Bitcoin is a property, and so on. And coincidentally, I ended up in Zug, which is the heart of the crypto valley, and it's the end of 2017.
Yes.
This is the midst of the ICO boom. All the crypto foundations are being established in Switzerland. They raise hundreds of millions in tokens and Bitcoin and etc. And I had to reinvent myself, my career, because my education, which I graduated from law school in Poland, I didn't speak any of the Swiss languages. I had to reinvent my career, so I ended up in Zug. And all those foundations were looking for legal counsels or legal advice. And it is still the time when, there were no really clear rules what is applicable to tokens, to Bitcoin and to others. So local counsels, local attorneys didn't have much of the advantage over what I knew. We are all starting from the
base level, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I joined one of the blockchain foundations, layer one foundations called Lisk Foundation. It's a layer one protocol. I started as a legal counsel. I got very quickly involved in, advising the board or the whole organization how to do different things. And later on, I joined BSV Association. That was 2021. Also a layer one Swiss nonprofit as a legal counsel.
But let's go back, right? Because it sounds as though you took on a more corporate role as you became involved in blockchain, but before you were intellectual property, how did your background of doing trademark copyright, how did that influence you to become part of this industry?
When you think about intellectual property, it's also very international, right? Whether trademarks or patents, these are the rights that you cannot really limit them or effectively to one specific jurisdiction. So that was definitely helping, that you're looking at law more from international perspective. You are accustomed to deal with lawyers from different jurisdictions. That was definitely helpful. And the same was, in a way, happening with blockchain and crypto assets. So that was definitely helpful.
So you having that network and that ability to deal with international issues is helped you to some extent.
Yes. And, I used to work for one of the largest trademark and patent law firms in Poland. So I had to deal with people with technical background. patent attorneys,
Right.
inventors. And if you are a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, you usually talk to people akin to you. Whereas if you need to talk to someone on a regular basis who doesn't have a legal, let's say, background, you learn very quickly that how to communicate, what to ask for, how to deal with different people. That was also helpful as well, because at Layer 1 foundations in Switzerland, you're eventually dealing also with inventors and so kind. You deal with
Techie people, right?
techie people,
Who want to get into the
developers.
detail.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Turning to you, Roman, who's been very, very cautiously in the background listening. Appreciate that. I understand your story goes back to PwC in Poland and then to Coinfirm, which is now Luca, isn't it? And you were doing digital asset transaction monitoring and analytical tools for money laundering or anti-money laundering. I think you were the head of fraud investigation at Coinfirm. So can you tell us a little bit about those experiences that you had at both of those places?
Sure. So at PwC, I was in a forensic team. So I was doing, let's call it, more traditional investigations. And the funny part was that relatively PwC forensic team in Poland was small. So I was doing all kinds of investigations from all things. So digging in someone's history, checking with whom he's going for vacation on the Facebook, through e-discovery projects, so securing laptop data, phone data, then reviewing it. So again, digging in someone's digital history, even to some on-site projects, for example, in some production manufacturing companies, checking potential frauds there, bribery projects, anti-money laundering, any kind of forensic job you can imagine. And during my long-term project in London, I've met Coinfirm's co-founder, Paweł Alexander, who offered me a position of head of investigations at Coinfirm. At that time, Coinfirm was providing, as you said, anti-money laundering platform, transaction screening platform, mostly for VASP, so for exchanges, for cryptocurrency services, right? And with that database, one of the biggest database of blockchain owners assigned to blockchain addresses and frauds assigned to blockchain addresses, it was a perfect database to start another branch at Coinfirm, which is forensic, digital forensic, blockchain forensic. I agreed. It was a perfect, perfect opportunity to do something a little bit different. I already was switching to more cyber forensic projects anyway. And since then it was a crazy journey.
It always is a crazy journey when you go from something traditional where you're doing general investigations to in the world of blockchain. Everyone comes out and says, it's just been crazy.
Yes. It's still a small world, but at that time when I moved, it was even smaller. So when you met somebody in this industry, I don't know, from India, and you went to the US, they knew this person there. Like everybody knows each other. Right?
It's a small community.
Yes, we've done all kind of investigations, from the small ones for individuals who love their assets to some of the most infamous ones in blockchain history. As an example, I was with Laura Sheen. I was doing investigation on the DAO hack, which is now described in her book. We traced with Kroll, we've traced funds from Quadriga, one of the most infamous exit scams / hacks of the exchanges. Really hundreds of various investigations. And at some point, we also started to develop the tool. So not only doing the investigations ourselves and using this, all this data and all these mechanisms we created internally, but also with time it improved. We decided, why don't let others use it? Law enforcement, forensic companies.
So it was a proprietary tool that you helped develop over time that again eventually got licensed out to law enforcement.
Exactly.
just looking at Coinfirm, I saw one thing that you said online. You said that you were dealing with the first ever fully automated blockchain asset tracking tool. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I think the weakest part of Coinfirm was marketing, because at that time
He heard about it, so it wasn't that bad.
I mean,
Could have been better.
The problem is at the time where main companies on the market, Chainlight, they provided only graph clicking tool. We had already a tool that was able to trace everything in a real time, meaning when the fraudulent transaction was just mined, the tool detected it, automatically traced it further, send notifications. Investigator could wake up in the morning and the new evidence file was waiting for him. You don't need to click through it manually.
So that's the automated bit. It would be automated in as much as you could see the movement of the assets live, rather than having to manually go, I would like to see the next step, please. Right?
Exactly. And the beauty of it was there was no limits to number of transactions also, because imagine hack of the exchange. Thousands of Bitcoins, Ethereum, and other crypto stolen in hundreds of thousands of transactions. Imagine the graph. Imagine you need to click through all these nodes.
Zoom in and see all the addresses and the tiny fonts.
Exactly. And imagine you can the fraudster can automate that, of course, right? So this all goes live, and you need to act fast because you want to trace it to the first identified service and freeze it if possible, right? So the tool was able to trace hundreds of thousands of transactions one by one. The evidence file was created waiting for you. So the job of the forensic specialist is just to confirm that, prepare the report.
So it also says online that you de-anonymized advanced mixing services like Tornado Cash and Chipmaker. So think about my dad who's listening to this. Can you tell us what mixing services are and why a statement like that is important?
Well, with mixers, there are various anonymization tools. One of them are mixers / tumblers. Basically, the way it works, imagine instead of cryptocurrency, you have dollar bills, and instead of mixer, you have a box. And you don't want somebody to know that this is your dollar bill. So you put it to the box with other random people. You shake the box, and in another room, in the dark, you all take your part from the box. So you don't know who now has the original dollar, right? And so this is the mixer, because the nature of the blockchain is pseudonymous, so we don't know who's behind the address, but we all know that the transaction happened, and we can see that address A sends funds to address B. So now, if at some point I identify that address A belongs to you, and I see the transaction to Binance, now I know that this is your Binance deposit address. So now I can review all the history of your deposit to Binance. I can see how much you deposited, when, and so on. So mixers aim to obfuscate that tracing. Basically, all the participants of the mixer can send funds there and withdraw to another address, and the goal is to cut this trace. Of course, it's a perfect tool for criminals there. So some say that they don't see any option why a bona fide cryptocurrency owner would use Mixer, but there are stories. I had projects, for example, a cryptocurrency trader was forced with a gun to transfer all his bitcoins. So yes, some say that actually bona fide people also need this anonymity. However, I would risk the statement that most of the funds going through mixers are actually fraudulent.
I think that's probably fair enough. And I wonder whether, to make an explanation clearer, is to understand that you can see these transactions on a blockchain. So then how can you mix it up where you can see everything or the history of everything? As far as I understand, certain assets like Bitcoin, for instance, can be broken down into sats, right? Into these tiny composite parts. They're then put into a wallet or a number of wallets and then rebuilt back into either a whole coin or a certain number of coins. So it doesn't mean that they're necessarily washed in the way that we would consider them cash to be washed, where it's in a box and you don't know where it's gone. It's just that it's difficult to break up into or re-establish them from their component parts. Is that a good summary of how these mixers work?
Yes, of course there are various mechanisms. Each mixer is different, and which type there are more advanced ones with some additional options to make it harder to trace. For example, chip mixer had predefined addresses populated with bitcoins already. So when you deposited your bitcoins today to chip mixer, you could withdraw the same amount from the address that was populated to chip mixer half a year ago, let's say, or a month ago, right? So you don't see this straight line.
So it's almost in an effort to defeat a proprietary claim because you don't know which Bitcoin is yours. That doesn't stop other claims, but I understand the point that it's there to obfuscate the property.
So it's like the actual transfer of ownership happens outside of the blockchain. So for someone like Roman or blockchain companies who just look at blockchain, you don't see that the transfer of ownership, that somebody else became the owner. You just still trace the assets and you end up with somebody that is not the fraudster.
So in your view then, subject to cost, which is always relevant where people are trying to recover their assets, is it always a case then that demixing tools like Tornado Cash can be undone?
Well, it's, I'd say, if used properly, it's very hard or nearly impossible to trace through mixers with a few caveats. For example, if you want to mix too much at the time, then it's much easier. The bigger the amount you want to mix, the easier it is to then mix your transaction. But also, even if you mixed a very small amount, you did everything properly, you went through the mixer documentation and you're untraceable now. Still, after 2 years, 5 years, the FDA may knock at your door if you're a fraudster. Because, as an example, chip mixer data was seized in former NATO markers, by the way, that's a cool story. And then they can recreate all the transactions based on that. So still, there's always, in digital world, right? In digital world, there's always some way to catch it.
Now, to move on slightly, you both have academic-leaning roles. Marcin is a member of the expert panel at the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, and Roman is a guest lecturer at the SGH Warsaw School of Economics. What have you gained from these experiences, and why are they important to you? Marcin first.
Why I find it interesting and enriching is that when I'm, let's say, preparing for a teaching session, preparing slides, thinking about what I want to share with the audience, I less think of what I want to say. I more think what I want them to learn. And that changes your perspective. So it's not that I'm going to show up and dump hundreds of slides full of text to them. I'm thinking how to communicate knowledge and experience in a way that they can remember as much as possible afterwards, after they leave the room. And this is particularly useful because we communicate also in professional environment. If I have other team members, I start to think we are all different. We all have different backgrounds. We have different genders. We have different life experience. So we can interpret the same message in a different way. And if you're preparing lectures, preparing teaching sessions, it's best to always put yourself in the shoes of the person that will listen to you. So that's particularly useful. Same with the clients. We both communicate with clients. They are not always lawyers or people with legal background. So you need to think of what are you trying to pass that will be understood the way you would like it to be understood.
Roman?
Well, on a personal basis, I always thought I will never be a good teacher. I got irritated too fast, but then I realized that actually I enjoy it. So
let's turn to token recovery, which is a Swiss entity designed to recover lost or stolen crypto assets. On your website, you note, to open quotes, "We are a team of recovery specialists combining technical expertise, legal proficiency, and a swift, discreet end-to-end process devised to get your property back," end quote. So how did this all start, and where did the idea come from?
So the decision to set up token recovery was actually my idea. We set it up in December last year, but for several, definitely months, if not years, before, I've been thinking of, how to improve the process of asset recovery, how to improve the chances of people that lose their crypto assets to recover them. And, I've been in the space for 7.5 years now. I've seen a lot. And although it's very detrimental to the reputation of blockchain technology as such, when we see this, stigmas of, crypto is for fraudsters, crypto is for criminals, which is not true if you compare it to fiat.
Yeah, it's cash,
for example. But on the other hand, if you are a victim of a crypto fraud, you were scammed, or you were subject of a phishing attack or investment scam or pickpocketing scam, and you start to think, okay, so what do I do next? And you're facing total, negligence or lack of awareness from the side of law enforcement, lawyers. You feel like maybe crypto is for criminals because it's so easy.
I guess you feel vulnerable,
Exactly.
a little bit embarrassed, or maybe a lot of embarrassed. You're financially ruined.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, to start with, a lot of issues that you've got to overcome before you even start looking for solutions. And I guess there aren't that many clear solutions unless you speak to the right people, right?
Exactly. So I was thinking I'm not sure if we are going to be successful, but let's give it a try. I have some experience in the industry. I'm a lawyer myself. I've been involved in designing this digital asset recovery for BSV. So I've been thinking about, this is the current situation. If you lose your crypto on different blockchains, it's almost impossible to recover them effectively and efficiently unless you're lucky. And we are building an efficient tool. So I had some experience in that, and then I've known Roman for a year or two before, and it was the time when Coinfirm was acquired by Lucas. There were some changes in the company, and I reached out to Roman and say, hey, look, would you be interested in joining the company if we set it up as a little bit of a boutique consultancy that is there to help victims of crimes or frauds who lost their crypto from the moment of tracing the asset, doing the investigations which we can do in-house with Roman and the team, but also with, I want to say, provide legal advice, because we cannot do it in all the jurisdictions, obviously, and crypto is cross jurisdiction, as you know. But at least to guide people to lawyers like yourself, or lawyers that have experience, understand crypto, have experience in asset recovery cases, they know what to do. So we try to also coordinate the legal strategy for our clients, connecting with the lawyers, talking to BAS. Eventually you build up a good network of contacts where if the assets are frozen, you can, I won't say pick up a phone, but you can go on a chat and send a message saying, look, here's the evidence. There are some crypto that were stolen that ended up at your exchange. Can you freeze it at least for 24, 48 hours so we can provide sufficient evidence, or maybe a request from law enforcement? So this was our idea, to really provide, take care of victims from end to end, from the moment when we just trace the assets to see what's happened until, enforcement of legal title.
So you're the first protocol. You want to be the shop window. People come in, you organize or have the relevant contacts and can push them in the right direction, but you manage the process as it goes.
That's correct. But, we also need to be careful. And in every conversations we start with any client, we always, underline this, that we don't do wonders.
If it's not a good case.
And it's not a magic solution. We don't have a magic wand that can, one click and your assets are back. So we are upfront saying,
Well, unless you're a BSV, and then it might
unless
be
you're a BSV. So that would be a thing. I did research at the University of Cambridge earlier this year. What are the obstacles to recovery of lost or stolen assets? I interviewed different industry experts, lawyers that are involved in crypto cases, blockchain analytic companies representatives, crypto investigators, law enforcement agents, judges that are involved in the cases. And I asked them, there was multiple questions, but one of them I asked them, what do you think is their success rate of recovery cases? They were, it's hard to estimate. It wasn't like qualitative research, it was their opinions they were sharing. It's like super low, definitely less than 10%, maybe less than 5%. Of course, every case is different, and time is of the essence. And if you have professionals, on the other side, your chances are super low, but they made mistakes. But overall, the impression was your chances to get your crypto recovered are super low. So we are still operating in a very small margin, but if at the beginning of your case, your chances are 10%, we want it to be 10%, not 1%. So this is where we come into play. We want to provide all the possible services within this 10% to maximize your chances still.
It's interesting that the view is 10%.
Even less.
Because my personal experience is not that. My experience is higher, and I guess there aren't necessarily records of wins. So people go, how many cases are there where you've recovered stuff? It's like, well, actually, a lot of this stuff settled privately, so you're not going to know it. It's under confidentiality. So to ask people, as you say, quantifiably, evidentially based, what recovery looks like may be misleading as to what, to some extent, or may not represent what the real situation is. And it's difficult, right? Because how do you quantify it?
Plus, it's all about the quality of the data. I'm not sure if this is the case with you, but you probably anyway have access to some pre-filtered cases. So if somebody lost £1,000, they wouldn't even come to you.
That's true. And the police may be recovering stuff and not shouting about it. There may be unreported cases. But this is what I think I want the message broadly to be, is that, yes, people may view it as 10%, or they may view it as less, but actually there are lots of different mechanisms that allow not reported circumstances to arise whereby people do get their stuff back. But I understand that, the philosophy may be, well, in that 10%, we want to be high on that 10%. We don't want 10% of 10%.
We want to maximize the chances within the boundaries of whatever the chances actually are.
Yes, I understand that. So I had a look at the process on your website. There are 4 steps to this process that you've outlined that I want to run through. And we'll go through it, if that's all right with you. The first one is consult and review. It says on your website, we gather details of your case to understand its scope. Now, assuming this means transaction hashes, facts of the scam, or facts of the hack, a form to fill in for the victim. Is that right?
That's correct. Roman, you can expand on that, but I think the best explanation of all the phases would be just to take a hypothetical example. So we have Mr. Smith that has just lost £1 million in Ethereum. He has no idea what to do. He's totally lost. He doesn't know whether he should go to a lawyer or to law enforcement. But for whatever reason, he just Googles and he sees our website. There is a submission form where we ask for as much data as possible, but at least wallet addresses and transaction hashes. So he fills up this submission form, we receive the information, and here's what we do. We do the first very common, call it quick and dirty, but like initial feasibility study, which is free of charge. We really look at we put it in the different tools that we use. We check what actually happened, how complex the case is. Do we see, maybe there's like prima facie, North Korean Lazarus Group involvement, which probably means that there's no chance to recover anything because these are really professionals. Or if there's the mixing, if there are mixers involved, chain swaps, exchanges. So we do this quick feasibility study, which is free of charge, and we come back to the client and say, look, here's what happened. Your case, based on our experience, is complex, easy, medium, something like that. And we can do a proper investigation, and that would probably be the second phase here, within specified time for a fixed price that we always tell you up front. At the end of this second phase, so the proper investigation, you will receive as a client an investigation report with all the tracing that we can do, indicating, wallet addresses, exchanges, virtual asset service providers, where your assets ended, or where, the perpetrator had some connection to. And there will be some recommendations coming from us. Not necessarily legal advice, but based on our experience, we think it would be good to have to request to contact law enforcement in your jurisdiction, so they request Binance, Coinbase for the information based on this wallet addresses, right?
So you've sort of touched on point 2 here. So first one's consultant review. You essentially want to extract as much data as you can from the victim to see whether it's viable, right? And then if it is viable, and as much as it's gone, the funds have been sent to somewhere that will comply with a court order, somewhere that is sensible, where there is a relatively linear process, then you will move to point 2, which is trace and evaluate. Again, I quote from the website. Our expert team will conduct proper investigations and cooperate with leading blockchain analytics firms to track your lost or stolen assets, end quote. So this is the blockchain and analytics section where, essentially, where have the funds gone? So do you do this yourself, or do you rely on third parties? Question number 1. Do you have any preferred software? Question number 2. And are there any known limitations of this process? But I think we've covered a few of them. But I guess this is for you, Romus. Question 1 really was, do you do this yourself, this process?
Yes, we do. So we, as Marcin said, first we do the quick initial feasibility study. If we see case as feasible, then we do the proper investigation. By proper investigation, I mean you need to not only trace it properly, but also you need to explain it properly for a court. And funny enough, sometimes to explain the case in a words that will be understandable and still, will really reflect what really happened, it's tougher than to trace it in blockchain. So you need a proper forensic report that would stand in court. We may also support our client as expert witness in court, which I did, including US federal court. So you need to really explain to the judge, who sometimes does not really understand what blockchain is.
Or the limitations of knowledge, right? Because the judge may go, oh, well, why don't you know the person who stole from you? Because you met with them several times online, and you have to explain the reasons why you might not know who they are. So that forms part of that expert report as well, right?
Yeah, so I also, master these comparisons to, let's say, more traditional market, right? When it comes to tools, to be honest, there's no one that is the best. Various tools are good for various kind of projects. To give you an example, one tool may be really good to analyze Ethereum smart contracts, if the hacker is using a lot of bridges and so on. Whereas another may be good when you deal with, let's say, investment scam, when you have hundreds of thousands of victims and you need to trace many transactions together. And tracing it manually, it's literally impossible. Also, in some cases, there's no tool that will help you, and you really need to use the raw data, blockchain raw data, and use your imagination, creativity, and Excel.
Or you start creating a new piece of software. Exactly. I guess it's almost like having a hammer and a screwdriver in your toolbox, and you want as many tools in there as you can, because you're not going to hammer things in with a screwdriver, right? I guess it's a little bit like that.
That's a good comparison.
And the tools also, Roman mentioned that they differ a little bit in the methodology, and then the unique selling points of each company that sells the tool is their database. So a specific wallet address may be attributed to, let's say, to an entity A, and may not be attributed at all in the other tool. So it also helps to use check the case or the transactions with a couple different tools. And this is what we do, because we are not tied to use only one tool. We use different ones.
You're agnostic in as much as software, right?
And it also looks well if you can combine a report which has some statements confirmed by 2 or 3 different tools.
Moving to the next stage is the plan and authenticate. You say in your website, to quote, "We will assess your challenges and build a personalized legal strategy in collaboration with premier legal partners and law enforcement. We then move to prove your rightful ownership, end quote. So my view is law enforcement should be contacted in any event, right? Whether people believe that they're good or not, you should get a crime reference number. I know people have issues with action fraud in this jurisdiction, and it just sits on a ledger in someone's office. But in any event, always get a crime reference number. But I don't know whether you've experienced anything else in different jurisdictions with law enforcement. I mean, overall, do you feel as though they're doing a good job or that there's more to learn? I don't know whether you have any views on that.
The larger the case in terms of value, the more interested law enforcement will be to take it as a priority. And there are some informal thresholds for the federal agencies in the US that they will not even look at your case if it's less than 1 million. These are informal thresholds.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the local law enforcement might be more inclined to look at smaller cases, especially if there are many victims, because, well, they want to help people. So it's not necessarily about the value, but the amount of the people that were scammed. The main theme also is the lack of resources. All law enforcement agencies are understaffed and under-resourced. And I heard on the conference on Monday this week in Cambridge that 70%, I'm not sure if the data was right, but 70% of all the crimes happening today in the UK are frauds. Imagine the amount of workload that is coming over on the desks of those police officers.
It must be overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So then to have to teach themselves about blockchain, or at least the fundamentals, is going to put them behind, because they need to then catch up, right? They need to understand the tech to even get ahead of it. So I suppose there's a reason why in some instances law enforcement can be quite slow, or at least don't have an appetite to even get engaged with this.
So what we want to do, we want to assist our client to the most possible extent.
Yeah.
We want to do the homework for law enforcement. So with the tracing, with the investigation report that we do, we can provide our clients with something that then he or she can share with the law enforcement. Of course, law enforcement will not take it for granted.
Yeah, they have to do their own checks, right? They're not just going to say, we're going to rely on this blindly.
But instead of, searching for a needle in a haystack, they would just start with verifying if our findings that refer to, we think, facts are true or not. It makes the whole thing easier. And
is it like giving the law enforcement agency a leg up, a head start? Don't worry too much if you don't understand that, because we provided you with something, some homework to start, but you need to just verify it. That's how you see it? Is that helpful?
The good example is one of the cases we've had recently. It's a client case stuck, and police says funds went to the mixer. We can't do anything about it. We don't have the tool that has the mixing. The client researched the market, found the tool that has the mixing, but we checked that actually in that tool, the mixing doesn't work properly in that case, right? So what we did, we manually mixed the transactions, we converted the report, we explained everything in all the details, each step, and the client submitted this report to the police. So that now they don't need to spend 1 month on trying to demix it. They just need to go through the report step by step and understand how it was done, and they can decide, okay, that's fair enough to at least check the other side of the mixer and check the data that they provided, and they already know the suspect's name. So if they just check it and confirm it,
so you're expediting the process, or the criminal process, that law enforcement would have to go through to show evidence, right? Whether it's almost to some extent like they're not even asking for you to get involved, but you're helping them in any event because you're client-centric.
And then, we touched upon this earlier, that if you are a victim of a crime that involves crypto assets, if your assets were stolen, you will really feel lost, because you talk to law enforcement and they don't understand. And if they understand, they will tell you they're understaffed. If they're understaffed, they have sufficient staff, they will say, well, our tools don't work properly, or our tools just cannot help. So we are there a little bit building upon inefficiencies of the existing system as token recovery. We are there to fill the gaps and be there for the client. We will not solve the case on our own, right? We don't have all the authorities, the powers that law enforcement has. But to the most possible extent, we provide them with material information. Sometimes we even just the fact that we can jump on a call with a law enforcement agent and just explain things. Said, okay, that was helpful. I didn't know that.
To close this part of the conversation off, I do think that law enforcement over the years have got a lot better. I think that they are going in the right direction. But again, it is still a journey that we're all having to go on together. But I certainly feel as though what you guys are doing in private is assisting the general public service of law enforcement. So that is helpful. I think the last step in your process was enforce and reclaim. Again, your website, to quote, "Our team will help obtain and enforce court orders and secure legal mandates against non-compliant entities to ensure the swift recovery of your property," end quote. So in this respect, how do you add value beyond the lawyers who are instructed to deal with the recovery?
So we have a network of lawyers that we work with in different jurisdictions, specialists in asset recovery and those that understand crypto, have experienced, had cases like this in the past. That's already a first added value. So for our client, instead of just Googling or searching on the market, and you know how hard it is to actually find a lawyer that understands crypto, has experience in crypto cases. So this is our first added value. Second, many of those cases, as I said, they have a cross-jurisdictional element. So just coordinating work of lawyers in different jurisdictions might be a challenge in itself. And because for that phase where we help to create a legal strategy, working with different lawyers, we introduce these lawyers to our client, we coordinate that. For that phase, we usually are paid on a contingency basis. We think it's a fair deal. So we sign a separate contract where we say, look, if we are able to help you to recover your assets, depending on the complexity of the case and the amount that is lost, we'll expect a specific success fee, let's say 20%, 10%.
And that's for you to negotiate with that.
Exactly. So for our client, the value add here is as well that we have an incentive to try to limit the cost on the side of our client. We are there to challenge some of the lawyers or really provide the meat on the bone so our client is not spending hundreds of thousands in legal fees for the lawyers to educate themselves on crypto.
So are you also liable for the net amount? So if they've spent a lot of money on, say, legals, then that lowers what you are able to recover? Is it netted like that?
Not know, but it can lower the enthusiasm of a client to proceed with the case.
Which might
These cases may take years.
Yeah.
And, after hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and bills, usually the clients can just give up. And then we will never be paid for this phase because we are paid only if the assets are recovered.
So it's incentivizing throughout. And that itself can be a challenge, right?
It can be, but I think it's a fair deal to the client. So look, we will get paid only if you are successful. And we have a natural incentive to try to keep your costs low when you deal with other lawyers.
In the quote on your website, you talk about non-compliant entities. So my question here is, can you tell us about how you've dealt with non-compliant entities before? Because this can be particularly challenging when you're trying to enforce a judgment, when you're trying to enforce any sort of order and you just don't get a response. So what have you found is helpful?
We can divide it to compliant, which are obviously the easiest, non-compliant, which you can still reach to through various jurisdictions and force them. So then it's a legal matter. And then you have the ones that would not respond at all. You don't even know where they are based. Or maybe they claim that they're decentralized, there's no owner.
Yeah.
And so on, right? So with these ones, sometimes I can deal very on check data. I figured out that some you can actually, with a proper analysis, you can identify their liquidity and based on time, value of the transactions, based on them trade done there on the order book, you can actually figure out some interesting stuff. In some cases, it's impossible. It all depends on the case.
If it's a virtual service provider that operates from a non-compliant jurisdiction, there are many of them, right? Some offshore jurisdictions, countries like Russia, Thailand, some Southeast Asian jurisdictions. Unfortunately, there is quite often nothing we could do.
Yeah, I've seen that before, right? Because some exchanges now pretty good. I say now very quickly.
There is a progress, definitely.
Yeah, there's progress, right? So like much better words are being said about Binance if it goes generally to Kraken or Coinbase or Gemini. They're really helpful, right? But then there are certain ones that have in the past complied and then pulled away. So there was a trend last year of people seeking to get default judgments against Huobi, which was HTX. And they were sort of engaging, and then they stopped entirely. And then people were doing these investigations as to who was behind Huobi and was there any centralized party at all. I don't know whether you guys interacted with or had any experience, but in an instance where there is an exchange that people do use, but yet there are constantly changing entities behind it, have you worked out a way to cut through that and get what you want? Or is that something that you're still working on?
So there was one specific example. One of those exchanges whose roots are in Southeast Asia. We started searching for which is the legal entity that actually operates it. Mm-hmm. And we found out 4 different ones in 4 different jurisdictions. Estonia, Seychelles, Canada, and I think UK. And then if we reach out with a letter to one, they say, well, no, we just process payments. And they will not tell you go to the other one. That's it. Yeah. So you go to the other one. No, we just do X. It's not us. So it's a little bit like a whack-a-mole game. But we sent a letter to all 4 of them, basically saying like, look, if you don't provide us this data, we will report the Estonian entity to the Estonian regulator. We'll do this and that. And that sometimes might be effective. But obviously, the larger the case, and if you have any connection to a reputable jurisdiction, let's say US, and you can have federal agencies' involvement, exchanges are usually afraid of any problems with them.
Do people care about recovery so much, or do they just want to be made whole?
I would say for tangible tokens, not NFTs, they don't really care that the exact same coins that were stolen from them.
Yeah.
And probably it also depends on the jurisdiction if such a claim is possible. But specifically with cases involving stable coins like USDT, it's very often that the wallets that, we try to trace the assets where they go, and Tether has the ability to blacklist, to actually freeze some of the assets. So they can freeze a wallet that is full of, say, USDT tokens, but whereas only part of it is originating from our client. But because the larger amount was stolen, so they can freeze larger amount just to secure the whole claim.
Well, I think they have to freeze. I don't know Tether's tech as well as they do, obviously, but my understanding is they have to freeze the entire
That's what I'm saying,
amount.
Yeah. So that's from funny questions like, if you are a victim from 2015 and the Bitcoin was stolen, and we identified the law enforcement that seized this Bitcoin this year, obviously the value went significantly up and they cashed the Bitcoin, right? So what they say, we can pay back the victim based on the value at the day of the law.
$350 per Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, and there is a case that is currently going through the courts as to at what point you value the assets. That may or may not get challenged as time goes on, because is it at the time of loss or is it at the value now? So whether you look at it as a restitutionary claim or a proprietary claim probably is important, subject to whether the value's gone up or down. But my view of it is that the word recovery in the branding is interesting, because I would say, my practice is also digital asset recovery, but ultimately it's just making people whole, isn't it? Or attempting to make people whole. So I don't know whether you've seen any trends, but it sounds as, NFTs are sort of, as an object of desire, have fallen off the cliff a little bit, haven't they? So whether that comes back round again or not, we'll see. But
we advertise as in token recovery, reclaim what's yours. And then you can also understand reclaim specifically all the coins, but yours in terms of, the amount.
Okay. To move on slightly, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a friend's house in Zurich, and he turned on Al Jazeera. Obviously, that's his go-to channel. Good for him. And there was a feature about romance scams originating in Myanmar, which is also a hub for people smuggling and illegal gambling. I told my friend that this is exactly what was going on, and I was this year involved in a case, in a romance scam, whereby funds were traced to these locations where they are compounds and scams are occurring. I was glad that it's becoming newsworthy, right? So it's on Al Jazeera. And it got me thinking about how many other stories there are out there. So the instance that I was working on, this lady was a victim of a pig butchering scam, and she lost loads of money after her husband died. Someone took advantage of her emotional state. But again, it got me thinking about how many other stories are out there where there's an involvement with Southeast Asia, or, you know, illegal gambling and human organ harvesting and all these sort of grisly, horrible things. So are there any particularly relevant or standout stories from your experience? And could you tell us about them?
One of the best experts.
I was working on big scam for a few years now, and at the time when I started, I didn't realize how awful and findings I will get at some point, right? So there's a piece of article done by Reuters quoting my findings, and in the beginning, I started to see more and more victims approaching us and saying, yeah, someone contacted me on Facebook, WhatsApp, Tinder, wherever, and I invested a little bit of money. Then I invested more. At some point where I invested everything, and I convinced my cousins and my family to invest, they disappeared, right? But then I started to dig in, and what I've noticed was that many of these fake investment platforms are actually based on the same form. They look similar. The IPs are similar, or the same, sorry, and also based on on-chain data, I can see that all this money are at some point collected at the same addresses, and the scale is huge. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. There are victims who lost few thousand. I had a victims who lost a few million. I think the record was one victim who lost $19 million. And what we can see then is the typical behavior for this type of scam on-chain. They like to use stable coins. They collect these funds, they reuse the addresses, they mix it all, so it's very hard to trace. There are hundreds of thousands of transactions involved. It's really automated. It's also actually a merit for us, because reused addresses you can in some cases freeze. When again,
It seems a bit lazy to use the same addresses.
I think the reason is the scale. You have
It's just too big to not.
you have too many victims, too many assets to ladder. I was approached by over 200 victims of the blockchain scam, only myself. So imagine the scale. And also, if you go further, it's not only about stolen cryptocurrency, but as you mentioned, there's human trafficking involved, slavery. So these people, mostly Asians from Southern Asia, are brought to this location and forced actually to scam people. So these people are tortured, and they basically slaves who steal money from others, and if you check this article, you can see that the connections of the companies that launder the money for these criminals goes very high, even up to the ruling parties in some of these Asian countries.
And it's a numbers game. I will again refer to the research I did, and many of the people I interviewed say that a lot of victims are actually ashamed of reporting this to law enforcement, so we don't know what the actual scale of it is.
Definitely.
And very often, people are scammed for I wouldn't call it small amount, but in comparison to 19 million that Ron mentioned, these are small amounts. So, a couple thousand, couple hundreds, and they just give up. It's like, okay, well,
That's the cost of playing.
exactly. And even if they report it to police will ignore that. Like blockchain, 300,000, 300 pounds, it doesn't make sense. But it's a numbers game, because if these mafias, effectively, if they scam thousands of people every day for a couple hundreds, couple thousands, aggregate is a big amount. So definitely there should be some more, say, coordinated approach to finish this.
Yeah, it does seem scary, doesn't it? Because, you're talking about human organ harvesting and modern day slavery and crypto scams in faraway places. But again, it's for us, the three of us and others in this industry, to say that isn't the end of the game, and that you can get assets back or be made whole in spite of all of those hurdles. So I think it's an important message to finish that part of the conversation on.